The NRG Stadium in Houston, Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump are all set to meet for a bilateral meeting in New York. Joining us right now to understand what this meeting is all about, what could be the key takeaways, we've got Pant of ORF. We also have former Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. Harsh, what do you make of this? First, we saw those leaders. We saw Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump endorsing each other politically and economically. And then we see that meeting with Imran Khan, where President Trump said that he heard some very aggressive statements from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So what do we make of these two events, first of all?
Well, I would say that, the two events are quite different in the scale and scope of what the two countries are presumably trying to do with Mr. Trump. Mr. Modi was sending multiple signals to multiple constituencies and at the same time trying to make a case for this bilateral meeting that is supposed to happen today. So I think he is laying the kind of groundwork for that in the Houston rally. And he also made a very strong attempt to make it very clear to Mr. Trump that the issue of Kashmir, there is no need for any defensiveness on the part of India. The way India has gone about taking the Kashmir conversation forward is entirely within the purview of Indian constitutional framework. And I think that the endorsement that he got from the 50,000 strong Indian Americans was something that was a big takeaway for Mr. Trump as he goes forward and starts thinking about what he wants to do on Kashmir. The other important thing, I think, what Mr. Modi was trying to do was to make a case for what is going to happen on the trade deal today. So clearly, he was making a case that, look, India is also doing much on the trade aspects of the relationship because Mr. Trump was emphasizing a lot on reciprocity, and I think Mr. Modi's case was that we are actually engaging in a negotiated framework where both sides are trying to bring their best on the to the table. So I think that was an entirely different sort of a relationship compared to what we saw with Mr. Trump sitting beside Imran Khan. Virtually, at times it seemed as if he was doing it just for the sake of it. But clearly, once again, he has repeated the idea of mediation if India and Pakistan both want it. Right. And I think that's par for the course given the kind of diplomatic situation he finds himself in. So I don't think we can really compare the two. I think the two stand on their own. But clearly, India's outreach has been very substantive and very different in scale and scope than we have seen any time in recent history.
All right. So India's outreach has been substantive. Ambassador Prakash, coming to you at this point, what do we expect from this meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Trump that is going to take place, especially on the trade front?
I think we are looking at a gradual, steady and energetic building of the relationship. Look at how the relationship has been transformed. What at times we commit the mistake is to look at just one event and draw conclusions. That does not happen. It's a curve, it's a process. And that is what illustrates or indicates towards the energy in the relationship. I mean, I'm not saying that rhetorically, but the relationship stands transformed. And I think it's a continuum of that. When, Parikshit, in your memory, has been an instance of the Indian Prime Minister and the President of the US meeting 4 times or 4.5 times in 3 months or 4 months. And when there is high-level, intense engagement of the kind we have, that's what brings about results. So I think it will be a productive meeting because there is, the big difference between India and Pakistan from the American perspective, as I see it, or I conclude, is as follows. For the US, Pakistan is containing the negative because of the propensity of committing mischief, of upsetting, their best laid plans. So they need to contain the ability of Pakistan to do damage. So that is the agenda with Pakistan. With India, it's a purely positive agenda to build on the convergences, to take the relationship forward. So I think the two relationships are as similar as chalk and cheese.
Okay.
And I think that, we will see positive discussions. We may see something on the trade, but certainly the canvas of our relationship is very broad. The two leaders, depending on the time that they have at their disposal, will have discussions on an array of subjects, bilateral and regional.
Okay. Following up from their meeting in Osaka, Harsh, do you think there will be some substantive outcomes on defense, on trade concessions? We've been hearing that there could be a limited trade deal also on 5G.
I think seems to be at the top of the agenda. And I think Mr. Modi also reciprocated when he also talked extensively about trade, apart from other aspects that you discussed, that you were mentioning, defense and technology. So I think trade is something that both sides have worked on for the last few months and weeks, and there has been a constant back and forth between the two sides. And the expectation is that there will be a give and take. Already, I think, the first day of Mr. Modi's visit, where he reached out to the energy sector in the U.S. and made a very, concerted attempt to engage that energy sector. Part of that is actually all about trade. Part of that is to see how the trade basket of India and the U.S. expands going forward, and how we can build on this productive engagement that Ambassador Prakash was talking about. Because trade is something that is of a high priority to Mr. Trump as he goes into the electoral cycle. So clearly, I think there is something, some concrete results that we are hoping would come out of this, and I think both sides have indicated that there is something in the offing. But we will only know that when once the discussions are over.
All right, Ambassador Prakash, this entire visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and this is something the Foreign Secretary also said prior to the visit, has a very substantial business component. Do you think the message to the business community, President Trump, would be that India is open to business? We are also trying to reduce the trade deficit with the United States. Do you think that will be the tone of the conversation? And what would be the expectation from the U.S. side in this meeting?
I think the tone and the message will be on the lines that you have mentioned. The message already is categorical. My reading is that the energy summit in Houston was a game changer, because in one stroke, in the energy capital of the U.S., meeting the CEOs of 17 top the hydrocarbon companies, India sent out, or Prime Minister Modi sent out a very strong message that, look, we are your buyer of hydrocarbons, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, but as the third largest consumer in the world for years and years to come. And look at the pace at which the demand for hydrocarbons is increasing. We have bought 4 billion plus worth of hydrocarbons, LNG last year. It is going to be much more. Defense area. So, out of the $21 odd billion of trade deficit, it's already beginning to shrink. And we have clearly demonstrated that we are willing and able to work with the U.S. And while you did not use the Harley-Davidson word, I mean, I wish we give some satisfaction to Mr. Trump, because, the stakes are not very high, but the optics are good. And, it is our largest trading partner, largest technology partner, important defense partner. So there has to be some give and take to build on the relationship. And that's, I think, what we are doing. And already I see a mellowing down, toning down of the rhetoric by President Trump, and which I think is a good portent.
All right. Ambassador Prakash, Harsh Pant, thank you very much for joining us.